My name is Paul Sims. I'm in charge of an organization called Impatient Health, and I am speaking to you today from London. And we're going to be talking today about how AI is breathing new life into medical affairs, in particular, empowering MSLs and medical executives with next generation intelligence. Those are obviously big words, but I believe that today we're going to fulfill them. And it's very interesting, actually, because more than 1,100 people have registered for this session, which clearly shows a degree of popularity. Well, I suppose the first question to ask is why? I believe that medical affairs professionals these days have to be no less than superhuman. I believe that not only does medical affairs have to continue providing the support services to HCPs that it has done for so many years, but also now the organization is expected to be on the front foot, being the voice of authenticity, taking the responsibility for patient well-being and outcomes, to advance the standard of care across medical practice in so many different therapy areas, to be the primary educator and teacher, and to be the first point of call for one-to-one meetings with KOLs, as well as being the central nexus for real-world evidence within the organization. And in this world where medical meetings and interactions suddenly became digital overnight, I think that medical affairs has a huge amount on its plate. And I think that one day we're actually going to look back and ask ourselves, how on earth did medical affairs ever cope without the use of sophisticated technology? In the same way that we look back at the practice of medicine itself and wonder how we ever did it without the use of anesthetic. In fact, I think that medical itself, the profession itself, will undergo a similar revolution in terms of being able to use these kind of technologies that we're talking about today. So ultimately, the real goal of today's session and what I hope to get out of this is to figure out how to turn medical affairs from reactive to proactive. And, there's nothing wrong with being reactive. I talk to a lot of people in medical who say that, there's nothing wrong with that. Responding to what HCPs is very valuable service. But if we could look forward, if we could personalize interactions, if we could surf that wave of information rather than just being crushed by it, then I think that we would transform not only our own organizations, but the nature of our pharmaceutical companies themselves. And given this relentless march that we have towards specialty therapies, to more sophisticated therapies, we need that ability to gain understanding, gain traction with new audiences of HCPs and KOLs more quickly than ever before. So could AI be the answer? Could we treat AI as a smart companion of some kind? I believe that there is an opportunity to have a digital guide that absorbs massive amounts of information, that finds those needles in a haystack and leverages the influences that we have going forward. So hopefully those are all pretty strong reasons for why we've decided to put on this session today. Luckily, you're not just going to be hearing from me. We have some fantastic people, I have to say, who you can hopefully see on your screen right now. First off on the left is Faisal. Faisal is a rising star at BMS, where he's been for nearly 5 years. He's now the VP and Global Head of Risk and Safety Management, Safety Risk Management, as well as Worldwide R&D. He was actually just the start of the lockdown. He was in a role where he was president of medical head of European markets, Australia and Canada. And he's got a great track record of value creation in clinical development, as well as medical affairs, especially in oncology, hematology, rare and primary care. Fantastic to have you with us, Faisal. We have Samin with us. Samin is the UK's Chief Scientific Officer and Medical Director at Novartis, where she's been for a couple of years, and she also spent 5.5 years at GSK, 2 years at Merck Serono. She's definitely one of the sharpest minds that I've come across in this field, and she's also in previous roles been responsible for value and evidence. So she's very well versed when it comes to RWE, disease modeling, HEOR, and lots of that juicy stuff that we all need so much of these days. So absolutely fantastic you can join us, Samin. The next thing I have to do is actually make an apology. Heather, unfortunately, is very unwell, and despite her best efforts, and she's a real trooper, she's one of my favorite people in this industry, she has been unable to make it today. So unfortunately, we haven't got the Novartis tag team that I was hoping for, but hopefully we can have Heather at a future session at some point. And then we have Razim, or Raz. Razim is a good friend of mine. He's the chief growth officer at youre.ai, where he's also one of the founding partners. And you may notice that this isn't the first time that I've had youre in a webinar. There's a strong reason for that. I think that youre is a very interesting company indeed, doing some absolutely fantastic work, and a little bit different from most of the companies focusing on AI. What I like is these guys use AI to empower rather than supplant their staff to empower rather than supplant the pharmaceutical staff, should I say. And they do that not by just creating the smartest or the deepest intelligence, but they also create the most explainable and transparent and empowering AI as well, which I think is absolutely key, particularly when it comes to working with MSLs. In fact, it was the work that youre were doing in this medical space that actually inspired me to put on this webinar in the first place. So I'm obviously very, very grateful for that. So the first thing I'm going to do before you hear from these wonderful people is actually get you guys to do some work. Sorry, let me just show you the screen right now. You should see a little window appear upon your screen. And I'd like you guys to answer this if you can. How would you describe your company's current ability to adopt sophisticated digital tools in medical affairs? So this will hopefully tell us what the state of play is today. And I'm being particularly difficult on these questions, by the way, because I'm only allowing you to choose one answer. So it's either strong, we believe medical can be transformed and enhanced through technology, highly active. It's sporadic in terms of some areas of the medical affairs units are attracting investment, or it's sporadic in terms of geographical or therapy area, or you're considering it, we're open-minded, but you're still at the pilot stage, you're unaware, your company is simply not consciously seeking opportunities, or you're even against, your company is not interested in the widespread adoption of digital in medical. So I'm asking this question at the outset to try and really understand where everybody in the room currently sits. And while you just have a moment to do that, I'm going to say to you, this session is being recorded, so please don't worry about that. You don't need to ask me. So you'll be able to listen back or share it with colleagues. And also, I would love for everyone here to use the Q&A box during the next 46 minutes that we've got. So please do ask a question. Make sure your question gets answered. That's the only way that we can guarantee that you've got the value out of this session. So please do use the Q&A box. Okay, let's have a look at the polling. You can hopefully see on your screen. There we go. Okay, so we actually have a joint winner at 26% each. It's either strong or considering, so perhaps we're a little bit polarized in our approach here. We're either doing wonderfully or not so well. Fortunately, not so many people ticking the unaware or the against box. Pleased to see that, and pretty high gains for the other two. So we are making progress. I think we are doing this stuff. We are getting on with it, and I'm really pleased to see exactly what is going on. So let me ask our panelists to unmute themselves and to get their videos going. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate you being here. I want to just start off by asking you guys what you see as the problem. What is the great challenge that we have in medical affairs that you think that this kind of sophisticated technology can actually solve? And in particular, I'm asking Faisal and Samin to comment here. So if you wouldn't mind, feel free who goes first and who goes second, but I would love to hear your opinions on this. Faisal, I can see you on the top, so do you want to go first?
Oh, okay. No, I'm happy to go forward. I mean, I think rather than looking at what are the problems that we are trying to solve for this, I think it's really what are the opportunities that can be capitalized on using this kind of digital technology. One of the things that really frustrated me for many years within medical is that there was so much we could do, but the incremental resource needed, investment needed to get those things done from a medical perspective would usually be greater than the potential benefit or the incremental benefits. But now, with the use of sophisticated digital technology and sophisticated medical specific innovation or digital innovation, I think we're getting to the point where we can now do a lot more with what we wanted to do. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, and a lot of my examples will come from areas where I've had serious learnings on the back of, which has really shaped my thinking. So I was looking after a launch for a new medicine to raise patients' platelets. It was approved for an autoimmune platelet disease, and then subsequently got approved for severe aplastic anemia. And in that situation, and it was a very unique development plan, the results were really transformational. We got approval off the back of an interim phase 1 piece of data, which got published in the New England Journal of Medicine. The study was conducted by the National Institute of Health, and there was no other therapy for these patients, and it was a massive unmet need, and they were all treated in tertiary centers. And I thought, there is nothing we need to do to get this drug in the hands of patients. Everyone's just going to use it. Not only do we not need to sell this drug, medical don't even need to do anything. All we really need to do is do a couple of MI letters and everything will be done. Everyone kind of bought into that and everything was fine. A few weeks after launch, I was on a field visit in Minnesota, and I was talking to the professor of hematology there about a clinical trial program. And at the end of that, I mentioned to her, oh no, it's great. And I was asking her just a nuance around that part of the label that had come out for this new drug around this new indication. And she looked at me with a complete blank expression. And I thought, what? And she said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. She even knew the data was available. She didn't need the drug approved. I was absolutely shocked at this. And so I quickly went through the data and so on and so forth. And then this thought was on my mind all the way as I drove to the Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic, #1 hospital on earth, center of excellence. And the very first thing I asked the professor there, and I was going to him about something completely different, was, you are aware about this new data? And he said, I've got no idea. So I thought, my goodness. So I quickly told him. He actually had a patient with severe aplastic anemia on the ward. And they treated that patient, so actually maybe inadvertently promoted there. But the point is that this taught me 2 valuable lessons. One is, no matter how high the unmet need, and no matter how good the data, no drug will ever sell itself. And I think that's something for all of us in medical to really kind of digest. And the second is the frustration knowing that even now I knew this information, if we were ever in this fortunate situation in the future, it would be very difficult for us to capitalize on that, because there were so few patients, so few people treating it, and such a large number of HCPs, potential contacts. How would we be able to invest that sufficient resource? And this is why I really got interested in the use of novel digital technologies to help find those needles in the haystacks and find those sequences in the needle of the haystacks in those rarer diseases or rare instances of data, which will help us then, instead of creating massive teams and doing a blanket approach, we can then go and just do just enough to a few people based on combination of internal and external data. And I think, as you said, Paul, earlier on, I think in a few years' time, we will be in a situation where we will find it difficult to appreciate how medical affairs, or in particular field medical, would have operated without this technology, just like we would never leave our homes now without a cell phone, sat-nav enabled cell phone. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Faisal. Samin, I can see you're excited to add. Yeah, itching to add.
No, I mean, I don't think I'm going to answer the question around what are the problems that we're trying to solve. I think what I'm going to do, and I'm sorry if that sort of goes off on a tangent, but I really want to address the opportunities, actually. I think the opportunities are endless. I think we're only just beginning to scratch the surface of what these sorts of AI type tools can help us do. And I think, first of all, you've given us a great example of in that particular setting, how in a rare disease, how that ability to pull that data and really understand who the customer is and how they use that data is so key. But I guess the way I look at it, I kind of think about what is it that we have internally and how can we use these tools to really optimize how we ourselves as a function operate. So for example, we have, our MSLs are out there speaking to customers, they're logging insights. We have a MedInfo team who will have access to a wealth of information internally. So how better can we use these tools to really access information as quickly as we can to not only respond to customers' needs, but also for us internally to really digest the insights that we're also collecting, and how can we really use those insights to inform our own strategies. And I guess at Novartis, the other big area where we have invested in is looking at our own data trial trove, right? We've got years and years and years of patient data from our trials. So we're now using AI and machine learning applications to really understand what does this data tell us? Can we use some of these placebo arms within our data sets to actually generate in silico type trial arms? And I guess if I bring it back to medical affairs, one of the key things that, as you mentioned, we do is that early customer engagement. And I'm really seeing now a move towards being very active in that kind of early space. We're really the first people to really look at how a drug might have to enter a market. What is the clinical environment? Who are the customers? And then look at the evidence gaps and what kind of data do we actually need to ensure that not only can we meet our reimbursement requirements, but also generate the right data for our customers. So I think that's really where I think AI can really come alive. And even recently, I've been looking at how can we better use the information that exists online and digitally to better understand our customers. And I guess given the fact that we've moved now into this virtual world, it got me thinking more about prescribers and healthcare professionals. You know, we have the sort of typical KOL, you know, typical key opinion leaders who would often be at congresses and, you know, be kind of the key spokesperson for a particular disease area. But now we've moved online. So who are the active influencers online? Who are the people that are engaging with social media or other channels to really showcase not only their data, but other people's data? And how do we kind of, you know, get better at looking at that and understanding it and then engaging with the right people? So I think that's a really key area. That's a big question for me that I'm trying to look at. And I think that will, you know, having that understanding will also then inform our MSLs, our field medical teams in head office medical teams, to better think about their engagement strategies. And similarly with real world evidence, there's a lot of work going on in the UK to better harmonise our health data. But again, once we've got that in place, I mean, even now we've got pockets of it, you've got, you know, an opportunity to really use AI tools to understand diseases in more depth and patient subgroups that you might then also want to, you know, target for particular medicines. So I think the opportunities are endless, but we're only just scratching the surface.
Okay, so there's an opportunity across so many different areas, and I think that's very plain to see. I think I'm going to invite Raz, if it's right with you. I know you have a couple of slides up your sleeve, and it would be wonderful to just hear what it is that Okra and yourself have been doing in this area here to address some of the opportunities rather than challenges that Samin and Faisal have expressed, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. But I'll have to be honest, there's more than a couple of slides, but it should be good. So one thing I might do, I might actually address the problem, right? And I think we've kind of heard it from the guys, is that the level of work required nowadays simply to keep up is kind of bordering on insanity, right? The volume of information, the number of KOLs, the new digital influencers, medical meetings, it's all going in one direction. And then you add kind of the number of indications, therapeutic areas, molecules, the complexity is growing. It's not declining. But I don't even think that is the biggest problem. I actually think the biggest problem is we don't just live in a world now where the goalposts move. We live in a world where the pitch is also moving, right? So there's not just a new normal, there are new normals. And I think it's a state of ever-shifting uncertainty, if I want to put a phrase on it. And I think that word itself, uncertainty, is going to be a semi-permanent, if not permanent, feature of our medical world moving forward. But it doesn't have to be perceived as negative, right? Because if life was completely predictable, it'd also be boring. We don't watch movies, for example, you know, if we know the ending. So we already welcome uncertainty into our lives, and it's because we have the tools to navigate it, right? So if that is going to be the constant in medical, we have to embrace it, and I think leverage it to drive the transformational outcome that we desire. Just think pandemic, vaccine in 10 months, that is absolutely underpins what I'm trying to say here. So, you know, very famous quote, it's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's actually the one that's most adaptable to change. And I think that is absolutely relevant right now. And then talking about opportunity, which the guys have already mentioned, you know, habits of consuming information have changed radically, right? Major medical meetings online, new breakthroughs are being communicated, you know, through social media, private networks. Everything I'm reading, 90% of stakeholders are now consuming information online. 50% or more have said they won't go to those, you know, physical congresses. And this has accelerated that whole new wave of digital influencers and online leaders that even Samin just referred to. But the volume of information is not slowing down, right? Even the number of papers in the last 18 months on COVID are hard to comprehend, let alone actually read, digest, and act upon. And then if you look at portfolios, probably of Novartis and BMS, they're continuing to increase. New therapy areas, new indications, experimental treatments, ultimately generating even more need, even more information. So the question I always pose is, within your organization, do you have the tools to navigate all the uncertainty that this is inevitably going to bring? But what I mean really is, do we have tools that allow us to look forward, not look backwards, right? We don't drive a car by looking out the back of the window, because the new world is going to demand a whole new set of knowledge, a whole new set of relationships, a whole new set of influence to be developed. And building that presence in new therapeutic areas, new indications is going to be critical, right, to the success of bringing that drug to market. But also understanding, in my opinion, the scientific share of voice over that critical period, 24 months prior to launch, is going to be a huge factor. And then the internal stakeholders, and for me, MSLs are arguably the most important asset of any pharma company today. We're adding to them. We're adding medical educators, clinical scientific liaisons, but all of these people have to be empowered, right? We can't just keep adding resource. So that's why it's no surprise to a company like ours, where the industry is looking towards technology. And I think the goal is to cut through the noise of endless information that we have at our disposal, turn medical affairs, and Paul, you said it, from reactive to proactive. I'm a massive believer of that. Be on the front foot, pretty much for the first time, I think, and really empower pharma to initiate the conversation, influence the conversation, not just keep up with the conversation. And I think HCPs want a scientific and healthcare partnership relationship, and they don't want that traditional kind of reactive support approach that has been used for years. And that means new technology, new methodology. And again, I'm not talking insights from the past that help us do that. I'm focused on how can we use this information to predict what might happen? What are the signals that we're detecting, 2 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, because it's in the future where this uncertainty actually lies. So some of the solutions, at least where Ochra's been playing, I think, I'll go to a quote, success is the ability to go from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm. It was said centuries ago by someone we all know. I don't think he was talking about technology in medical affairs, but the observation here is that humans learn best when they try things, right? And they don't give up and they keep trying alternatives. And that's exactly how artificial intelligence and machine learning operate. The big difference with this tech, we can repeat the process thousands, if not millions of times per second, and without the loss of enthusiasm. So at Ochra, we decided to build a solution called MedCompass to address this exact problem. And for those of you who don't know Ochra, we're a specialist AI company focused on life sciences. We work across commercial, medical, and market access. But more important than that, we focus on explainability and trustworthy AI, and two components that I think cannot be compromised when it comes to the medical function. And I'm just going to list some of the applications, at least that we are working on and that we've provided value to the industry. I think the first one, automation, right? It's a simple, can we save time? Can we prevent mundane tasks, repetitive tasks, use our resource better? Sophisticated NLP built on medical ontology, swallowing all that unstructured data from the entire ecosystem and analyze it faster. If you can do that, I think then you can identify opportunity at speeds where somebody can actually do something, take action. And if you can detect that signal early, identify that opportunity early, you probably want to move to the third pillar, which is personalization. I hear personalization a lot, but you do require a lot of data. You need to go to that from a global, regional to a location, a healthcare organization, and then the individual to empower action, which is the fourth pillar on that one-to-one level. But I do think once you start going through all of those use cases, the big question for me has always been, well, what's the impact? How do you measure the success of all of this? And I think from all the conversations I'm having, it's about scientific share of voice. How are we doing versus the others? And over a period of time, being able to track that. So You know, at Okra, for example, we're processing thousands of conversations that are captured by our clients. We turn them into actions that can be taken by teams. But the information we handle specifically is obviously unstructured. It's complex in nature, and not a single insight is missed. And you can, absolutely can, cover multiple markets, right, from North America to Asia, where every data, every fact, every observation, every interaction is captured. Its importance is understood, and it's harnessed to drive future action, right, with very high prediction accuracies, where the important trends, clinical needs, concerns, requests from markets can be filtered to therapeutic area leads, disease area specialists, MSLs, to make decisions in a fraction of the time. We've seen it happen several months, you know, a reduction in terms of time for a signal to be detected. And all of this can be 100% automated. And I mean, from an analysis perspective, not by removing the human in the loop. Okay, and we've supported you know, companies going into new therapeutic areas, launching new indications, cross-market learning, early detection of challenges, objections, you know, based on the sequence of launch, and even kind of content needs, providing assistance to medical teams focusing, you know, for example, on market-specific content requirements, and then tracking the change that occurs on kind of an enterprise-wide level. And I think I know today that, you know, with people watching in, the people on the panel, all these companies are speaking to thousands of doctors around the world and generating data, and they're expected to make sense of it. And I think the volume is so astronomical that it's impossible to make sense of, right? And then when you start adding in data from HCP networks, journals, publications, MI, honoraria, observational studies, et cetera, it is going out of control. And the analogy I will give is, imagine your desks right now filled with hundreds, if not thousands of papers, right? No category, no order, just a pile of chaos. But what's worse is these piles are getting bigger. And we know that somewhere hidden in this pile of paper is some crucial information that will allow us to make the right decision, but only if we can spot it. But how do we go about finding it? And I think the first thing we do is we try and organize, right? We get rid of papers, duplicate papers. We make smaller piles. We might organize them based on date, location. We might get the post-it notes out, the highlighter pen out, and that might work for a few hundred or a few thousand. But let's be honest, we're talking about millions and millions of data points now, papers, notes, trials, publications, etc. And that's truly where AI can really categorize, label that digital paperwork, that state-of-the-art NLP, those technologies that can distill down to the insights that matter from all of that, and really drive that kind of scientific share of voice that I spoke about. And I'll just end, because I've rambled on a little bit, is that over the last 5 years, you know, I've spoken to a lot of medical leaders across different companies, their journey of adoption, the pilots that they're involved in, the POCs. And it's great to see from the poll just earlier that many are now considering it or actively working on it. But I see something which alarms me a little bit, which is this whole DIY AI initiatives. And I think that is a very short term or very short-sighted. It's a ticking the innovation bucket. And in the long term, that may be more harmful when it comes to explainability and trust, because companies who try to build their own email systems and CRM systems, those systems don't exist today. It's not a core competency. So I still think there's a huge knowledge gap. And the understanding of what it actually takes to distinguish signal from noise, and what level of algorithms and expert knowledge and medical ontology is required to connect all of this. But AI is evolving. Our solution is certainly still evolving, but I think the impact for medical is transformational. And I encourage everyone to kind of enter this new world, to try to learn. And I think the one thing I'll end on is everyone will realize that all the things that we hold dear to us in medical, efficacy, safety, data, et cetera, are just as crucial as our ability now to navigate the uncertainty that will unfold in front of us through this new technology. I'll stop there. You know, at Okra, we're dedicated to the use of AI in medical affairs, and I hope to get the views, of course, of the panel on some of the points that I've raised.
Wow, thank you so much, Raz. That was a wonderful roller coaster ride through all the different possibilities, and you gave us a little glimpse of some of the technology that you've developed there. But I know that people can contact you if they want more, and I've put your contact details on the slide here in case they want to take a deeper dive into the actual solutions you're developing themselves. But for the time being, I'd love to just get a reaction, I guess, from Faisal and Samin. You guys have obviously just heard what Raz is doing. I'm just curious as to see whether or not this is a path that is aligned with what you are trying to achieve, whether you think that the right buttons are being pressed here, whether there's anything else that you think there's a gap with. Yeah, very keen to hear your view.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's a great overview and absolutely, talks to the challenge that we face, right, with the volume of data, and also how do we organize it so we not only do better understand our customer, but also that we better tailor our communications or material to deliver to that customer, but also how we then can use that to be proactive and have that debate or clinical conversation with people as necessary. And I like the analogy of the paper, because exactly that's just how it feels, right? You're just overloaded with information constantly every day. And we are actively looking, it feels like me in my day job. And this is absolutely the kind of solution that we are looking at, looking at. And I guess the question I had was, clearly AI and these sorts of advances, it is a bit of a buzzword, right? The last few years, everyone's talking about AI-driven, data-driven technologies and methodologies, and not only just in pharma, but in the healthcare environment as well. And I guess for me, the other question is around, it's great that we want to kind of really upskill and provide tools to our medical affairs executives to use them. But how can we also work with, I guess, healthcare systems to also enable better patient care using AI-driven technologies? Because I get, they're also overloaded with information and information, I guess. And so yeah, I don't know. I just think there's also an opportunity potentially for us as medical affairs to better partner with our customers in this space too.
Just to add on what Samin said, I mean, I think for me, the reason why I'm so interested in this space is because I've been obsessed over the last sort of 10 years or so around MSL sizing, and which I think is really, really important, because the field medical team, but also the head office medical team, is the external scientific face of the organization, which has always been important in a reactive sense, was critical when it was required to do something in a proactive sense, but in the future, it will be an absolute foundation for any organization. And getting the size of the field force right, making them more agile, was always a problem. And the problem with agility was two main things, right? One was we never had enough MSLs or medical people in general to be able to track into the industry, to onboard them and train them and do things for long enough. So the pool of people isn't that large, right? And B, I've just been very fortunate to be in organizations which were growing their portfolios, and all we were doing was just layering on more and more people as we could, more and more people. And then as the portfolio started to wane, layering off people, right? And I thought, how do we get out of this cycle? I think we solved one aspect, which is how do we quickly onboard and train people, medical people, to be good enough to have those peer-to-peer scientific conversations, credible scientific conversations, in an amount of time that makes sense, but not in an amount of time that by the time that knowledge is useful, the opportunity is gone. That's a different topic, but I think we're trying to solve that. The second piece is, how do you direct the activities in a way that makes sense so you can have a focused, intense type of activity over 3, 6, 8 months, and then roll that team off, or roll that medical team off onto something else. Traditionally, this would take years. People rely on local knowledge. You would find the MSL who knew everything about those local people in that local region. You would try and attract them to your company, then you would onboard them for a year, and then so on and so forth. How can we use not a generic field medical person, but a very competent scientist, pharmacist, or physician in the field, onboard them quickly, get them to do a period of intense something to try and solve some problem locally for 6 to 9 months, and then roll them on to the next problem? The answer to that, I believe, is utilizing of these type of novel medical digital technology tools to provide guidance on the next best action, on the next best sequence of actions, which will supplant or complement or enhance local knowledge that other people may have had, and you can just quickly kind of do that. So I think that is the critical thing, and this is where my interest in this space is.
Sounds like a dream, Faisal. So if indeed both of you,
I'm working on it.
In fact, all three of you really positive here about the huge benefits, and it seems like you're pretty well aligned with what Raz said, which is great. I'm curious, therefore, as to why we're still not universally adopting of these solutions. I mean, you saw that people are interested, but as far as I'm aware, only a small handful of companies, perhaps the ones that are working with Razim Okra and a couple of other companies, but not very many. And what are the barriers to adoption? What are the things that you're having to wade through at your end in order to get this through? And I've got an audience question on this, but I will come, I'll get your answers first.
I mean, in my view, and I'd be interested, Faisal, obviously, to hear what you think. I've worked in a number of companies, right? And I think the investment or the importance of medical varies from company to company. And I think certainly where I am now, we have been on a bit of a journey, and there's a huge transformation undergoing right now to make sure that from a medical perspective, we are, as you talked earlier, we are more proactive. We're there with our front foot forward. And then now they are really looking at the kind of tools to equip us with. So there is a lot of work in this space. But I would hazard a guess that actually probably why there is still very little investment in this space is perhaps this idea of medical affairs being, we believe that medical affairs are critical, and for the success of medicines and a core part of the business. But I still think there are companies that don't always value the opportunity that medical affairs can bring. And I think if they don't value that, then they're not always going to value the transformational aspects or the investment that, you might need to bring in to really optimize that opportunity. So that would be my view. I think there's still variation in how companies view medical affairs. And I think those that can drive things forwards and really show the value and the impact that we can have using these tools are going to really pave the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, I would agree with that. I mean, I've reflected on this a lot because it has always been a huge amount of frustration. Okay, why are these barriers existing? I think for me, there's two things. One is in the drug development business. I think from an organizational perspective, they want all the risks to happen in the early stages, in the target identification, early phase studies, late phase studies. Once you've done all of that over 15 years and you've got a drug and it's got to approve, everyone's exhausted and they don't want to make any mistakes. So the level of tolerance around doing something truly transformational or innovative, or maybe leaving value on the table, that tolerance is quite low. And so it's taken a huge amount of energy and effort for a lot of early adopters to try and move the needle on adoption of novel digital technology to guide medical affairs-led launch activity. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is just the limit of the number of contacts someone can have, a field medical or an office medical person can have per week, right? And just because of the need or the felt that was needed to be done face to face, scientific dialogue, and so on and so forth. I think both of these things are now taking a turn. One is companies are getting approved or getting conditional approval with smaller and smaller pieces of data, and the real learning and the development of data happens now at the time of approval and after approval even. So the level of risk that companies are now willing to take even at that point is more. So I think that's one thing. And two, COVID, right? COVID has now turned everything upside down in terms of the number of contacts the medical department can have per week. Because before it was felt that only in exceptional circumstances for people you knew really well and you were doing some transactional reactive work, you could do a phone call or TC or something. Everybody else had to be face-to-face. So it was 1 or 2 contacts per day for 3 days a week or something, exaggerating slightly. Now it's almost going to be upside down. You can do profiling visits, people you never met before, and people will be much more amenable to do that by WebEx or Zoom. So we can now have 10, 15 contacts per day sitting in the room, and just for those exceptional places or to reinforce things, go out. So this actually exacerbates the problem in one sense, because now we really need something to help us guide us through that. But now I think people realize that we can't do this using traditional manual techniques or art or using local knowledge. We need some help. And I think, so both of these things would move us in the right direction.
And I think you're right, you know, COVID, and we've heard this for lots of different areas, COVID has accelerated things, and you're certainly seeing more productivity with the external engagement through this forum with medical. We don't have the numbers typically that the sales teams do. So I think there's now an acceptance, actually, if we're going to be doing more digitally, we're going to need better tools and better ways to access customers, but even identifying who the key people are that we want to be engaging with, right? Yeah. Especially now, a lot of our influencers are going to be moving online now as well.
I'm very interested to hear what the audience thinks on this. So I'm going to do a little poll again, as we had so much fun at the beginning when I did that. So if you look at your screen, you should see it pop up. Generally, what do you think are today's greatest barriers preventing companies adopting machine learning technology in medical affairs? So exactly what we're talking about right now. Is it poor awareness of what's possible or unconvinced of the actual value? Is it a sense of digital fatigue or general hesitancy towards digital adoptions in general? Perhaps you've been through failed transformations in the past. Is it unreliable or low quality technical solutions available? Not obviously counting Okra, of course, but there's a perception there's nothing wonderful out there. Is it simply that you've been unable to prove the investment case internally? No ROI, no proof, concept, etc. Is it to do with the medical ontology that we have a different language from the rest of the world and we need unique technology to interpret it? Is it that the AI, of course, requires data and there's not enough of it, or it's not good enough from which that technology can actually learn? Is it down to our senior leadership and the lack of senior level buy-in? Is it the regulatory climate that's often cited as a reason why we can't do many things? Is it the key thing here as well? Or perhaps you think that all of the above is rubbish and you're convinced there are no real barriers. So I'll hold that open another few seconds. I can see just over half of you have voted already. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, everybody that got their votes in just at the end there. Let's have a look at the results, shall we? Okay, poor awareness of what's possible. So it's unknown of the unknown. Raz, I'm afraid you need to up your marketing efforts because people don't have a clue. So there you go, homework for you. But yeah, hopefully this webinar is addressing that a little bit, but people simply don't know, over a third of you, what can be done here. I guess in second place is the unable to prove the investment case. The ROI isn't clear. Perhaps we need a few more use cases. And in fact, I can even see in the Q&A, a couple of people have asked already, what are the good examples in the industry? Who are the forerunners? Who are actually doing this successfully? I would say, Faisal, I would probably put you in that category. So, I mean, I would say you're probably getting there as well. Well, you tell me. And so I think we've got a couple of people here who would probably give you a bit more color as to what they're doing. I don't know. Okay, and then regulatory climate is third, so that's always omnipresent, isn't it? Raz, I'm very keen to see whether or not you think these are legitimate excuses. Obviously the awareness, fine, that's fine, but the investment case, is that legitimate? The regulatory climate, is that legitimate? And then sort of in fourth place, you've got the sort of digital fatigue and sort of low quality data issues as well. Are those genuine barriers, would you say?
Well, clearly people have answered that. So they're probably legitimate in kind of where they work and what they've seen or what they've been told from kind of internal stakeholders. I think the unconvinced of value in medical is an interesting one, especially when that's being answered by, I guess, people in medical. And that also is a little bit alarming as well, because I think you've got two very influential leaders on this call today who have just spoken about seeing it as the opportunity, you know, going into the unknown. There is a lot of uncertainty with this, but I also think some people are still stuck at looking at AI and machine learning and the technology and measuring it with traditional, outdated, perhaps ways of looking at, you know, technology that they've had in the past. And I've seen a lot of solutions that companies have, which give them a lot of information about what's happened. The KOLs, what they're tweeting, what they say, you know, information that's already gone, it's happened. these systems we're talking about now, that is not what they do. They use that information to almost pave the future, right? It is, you have to think about this differently. You've got to think outside of the box. And that's where some of the challenges I've seen, which are very relevant to us, are then data sharing. And can we share this data? Can we not, right? And you start getting into battles with legal compliance, right? But we need to take the shackles off a little bit here, because, you know, there is so much within this data, and when you bring it together, there are so many more insights and opportunities we could uncover. Are companies willing to do that, or are they happy with the reactive state that they're working in? Because if it's not broken, let's not try and fix it. And I think the other one is people don't know what to measure, right? What is the impact of all of this? I keep coming back to scientific share of voice, because I think it is the definitive measure that we can get to. And if you are able to, you know, entry point of automation, just of field medical notes globally, is an absolute use case for AI. And you could set it up tomorrow, and you could have value in 2 weeks from now, right? So saying that there aren't use cases out there, but the point being is, you know, how far do you want to take it, right? So, and do you want to get to that scientific share of voice, which I could talk about for a lot longer, but
another advantage of not going the DIY route there, I guess.
Yes.
I'm sure Samin and Faisal, you want to get to that, but I'm conscious that, you know, partly because we started a couple of minutes late, we're running out of time, and I want to get to some audience questions. Let me just read a few of them out, and hopefully you can take one or two each. So Samin and Faisal, in your companies, was medical affairs the first in line to implement AI within the business, or was it implemented elsewhere, and, you know, were learnings from those other places taken from there? Marielle says getting the basics right is such a major frustration. That's another key barrier that should have been in my list. So thank you for Marielle for that. Can you speak to data fusion and its possibilities? Disparate MA systems containing various insights and fusing these data sets without costly integrations. Can AI be used as a way to avoid that interoperability problem and not have to go, you know, leapfrog some of the pain that we know, many of them? And then, how do you see AI impacting consent levels for companies and the ability to be transparent in how we manage customer data? So there's a nice selection of good questions for you. Thank you very much for those of you. By the way, keep sending them in, even though you think we're probably not going to have time to get to them, because we'll probably try and answer them, some of them offline, and send out something post-webinar to you. So don't be shy. I want to hear from everyone if possible. So anyway, Faisal, Samin, Raz, any answers?
There's quite a lot of questions.
Yeah, I threw several things at you.
I love the idea of AI solving some of our interoperability issues. I mean, we have so many systems and platforms internally that if there was a way that you could use AI to connect the information, that would be fantastic. Now, I don't know. I think this is something I would ask Raz. But I think the question around were medical affairs the first to use AI, you know, in our company? No, they weren't. You know, the first place where they've started to use this more is around kind of understanding data targets. So we're doing a lot of AI-based work with our genome sequencing and discovery work, but also, as I mentioned before, we've created this huge data lake with all of our trial data. So there's a lot of work going on to try and harness and extract insights from that using AI. But I think now really there is a huge movement now to look at how we might use AI-based tools for medical engagement. So that's kind of where we are now. You know, it's a work in progress, but no, we weren't the first, but I think we recognize there's an opportunity that we need to.
Thanks. Faisal?
Yeah, no, so first of all, I'd agree with that. So I think medical has either been a fast follower or a slow follower in some of the organizations I've worked in. It just depends on a few individuals who really want to, who see that kind of value. And a lot of it doesn't actually depend on the organization and the organizational priorities. It just depends on the portfolio they happen to have at that moment in time and what makes sense for that portfolio in that particular market or in that particular region. So I think, and I think that's quite important. If you have a very specialized portfolio in rarer diseases with a high flux of data and fewer HCPs or investigators, then you'll need to use artificial intelligence to find patients to put into studies, find signals to look for and validate safety signals, find insights to help to correct misinformation, etc., becomes much, much more. So I think it varies. Coming to the point that I think one of the issues has been, how do you measure? And as Rasim mentioned, the scientific share of voice has been something which is growing in a lot of popularity. It's, in my view, it will vary from company to company and portfolio to portfolio. It's not something dirty, and it's not something as a surrogate for sales. It is something which is very specific about what we do, because what do medical do as the external scientific face of the organization is to sense the information that's out there and the different bodies of evidence that are out there, and ensure that there's a fair and balanced communication and discussion around that, and an appropriate generation of fair and balanced bodies of data. And what scientific share of voice is measuring that, what the baseline is, and what the role of medical is in moving that needle into an appropriate way. And the era of social media and blogs and stuff has just exacerbated that. So I think scientific share of voice is something which will catalyze uptake of AI within medical, absolutely.
Guys, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to multitask. So what you will have seen is a poll has arrived on your screen. I'm going to do 2 polls to run in the background in these last couple of minutes, because I'd love to know what you think about 2 things. Firstly, content, which is the question you'll see right there now, and also whether or not we need next best action type solutions that you will have seen in, of course, the commercial sphere in terms of directing our MSLs. So do please answer those questions. I can see a quarter of you answered the one that's up there already. And just to close out, one final question is from Alex Perner, who says, the real game changer in our industry will be to beat healthcare inefficiencies. Do the panelists see the AI and machine learning help to overtake the 2 big challenges of costs and accessibility? A couple of very big questions, and unfortunately, I'm only going to give you a sentence each, given that we've got just 2 minutes left. So who wants to take that first?
Yeah, so I would just say the answer for me is, I think, yes. And the role of AI here is that it's going to eventually make redundant the role of commercial and medical teams. And what we will have is field-based data scientists, because when I was working in the hospital, we started seeing patients coming in, and rather than me saying, this is the data for why I want to treat you like this is what we're going to do, it was, let's go through the data together. That is what this is, that will enable pharma companies and biotechs to do with the health systems. Let's collaborate together, co-generate data together, and see how this is solving some of your issues and problems in a real local way. So I think the answer is absolutely yes.
Fantastic. Anything to add in a few seconds, Samin or Raz?
No, I'd agree with Fazil. I mean, we've looked at, can you predict the price and the benefit outcome of a molecule several years before launch, so you can enter negotiations much earlier on and have reasons and evidence points from all the data that can allow you to justify price, to provide access quicker, right? So this is work we're doing and have been doing for 4 or 5 years in market access. So without saying that, I think the roles of individuals in these functions will change, and then cost and accessibility by default will also be, addressed.
Fantastic. So, I mean, a final word.
I agree.
Fantastic.
I think they've said it all. I don't really know what more to add. And I think the more we can use data to predict future trends and be ahead of the game, the better, in a better place we'll be as companies.
Okay, well, thank you. We've hit the hour. Sorry, it was a bit rushed towards the end, but always good stuff. Loads of information. Massive thank you to our panelists for sharing their thoughts. Massive thank you to all of those of you who came and answered questions. That's very good. You'll see I've got the poll results being shared at the moment. A huge, overwhelming yes, I think. 2/3 of people saying yes for making sure we've got next best action for medical. And I believe that a lot of you should contact Razim after this to find out more about what's actually happening on that regard. So fantastic to have you here. Thank you so much. Let me know if there's any suggestions we've got for the future. Otherwise, I want to respect your time and end it right now. Thank you again for being with us. And yeah, looking forward to having you again sometime soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you, Paul.